All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Aedan Stockdale. I work with Manatee County Parks and Natural Resources. Okay, thank you. I work with Manatee County Parks and Natural Resources, and I wanted to present some research I did as kind of a partnership between myself and myself. Actually, this project right here started off when I was an intern with the Parks and Natural Resources Department at Manatee County, and I was at New College of Florida at the time, and I was looking for a subject for my undergraduate dissertation. And I was really interested in mangroves, and I was talking with staff, and an opportunity opened up to do some basically database mining, looking at collected data, and kind of tying that into some of the restoration projects we had done throughout the county. So in particular, we had one site, Robinson Preserve, where we had restored some tidal flow through the mangroves, and I wanted to take a look at the effects of water quality in that area. So the goals for this project between the two parties, the county and myself, working with New College of Florida, is I wanted to develop an understanding of what mangroves do, how they function in an ecosystem, what their important role is. I also wanted to take a look at what the current state of mangroves around the Sarasota Bay region is. And like I said, there's a lot of information out there that's collected for other purposes, for instance, historical aerials and also the water atlas. So I made extensive use of the water atlas. And then I wanted to take a look at the connection between those mangrove ditches and the water quality in the region. So the final part that was of most interest to the county was what was the effect of water quality pre and post restoration at Robinson Preserve. So the simplest question I thought I could ask myself is, what is a mangrove? Kind of a primer. And it turned out to be a lot harder to answer than I thought. So it turns out that it refers to two things. You know, there's the plants and then there's the whole community. So as a plant, they're subtropical to tropical. They live in that big red band around the world, and they like having their feet wet. They live in the intertidal zones. They can live in salt, but actually it turns out that they don't need salt water to survive. And they do this strange thing called viviparity. It means the seeds will sprout while they're still on the parent plant. But the last and most important thing is that they're not remotely related to each other at all. There's at least 7 different families, unrelated, of mangroves that just have these factors in common. My favorite is probably the one in the lower left-hand corner with a giant ball. It's called a cannonball mangrove. It's actually a type of mahogany tree. So this is the other meaning of a mangrove. It's the whole forest, the system, from the algae to the fish to the birds to the crabs that live in the tree. So sometimes in the literature, the two terms get a little conflated. So it's a little hard to, separate them sometimes. Here in Florida, we have 3 species: red mangroves, black mangroves, and white mangroves. And then we have the buttonwood, which is kind of off to the side. Now remember, mangroves are grouped by function, so even though it's related to the white mangroves, it doesn't necessarily have all the functions. So sometimes it's included, usually not. Here in Florida, the southern extent of the state is where most of these mangroves grow. They're pretty much limited by the temperature. And the ditching of mangroves I talked about earlier was primarily for 2 reasons. One, for mosquito control, and then the other was for coastal agriculture. So to give you some before and after shots, these are all from the 40s to 50s. This is Robinson Preserve before ditching. And after, you can see the cuts through the mangroves. It's the darker areas on the coast. Here's South Lido before and after. All those little white dots that you see are spoil piles from digging out those ditches. And then this is New Pass in Sarasota. There was quite a bit of ditching that went on in that area. So, questions I had for the study: what was the coverage in the region? And how chopped up and broken up were these mangroves by the ditches? And then what effect did that fragmentation have on the water quality? So this is the area I looked at, Sarasota Bay north to Tampa Bay. And I found that we had an average size of about 12 acres was the average size of a mangrove plot. In total, in the whole survey area, there are about 2,000 acres of mangrove coverage, which is awesome. But that 12 acres may sound big, but if you go back 100 years, then you're looking at hundreds of continuous acres of mangroves. So it's really, really shrunk down and chopped up. Taking a look at, what the density of ditches were, there was a lot of pieces that had those ditches running through it. So science doesn't always do what you expect it to do, but it's always worth talking about. I actually found that the water quality in terms of total nitrogen and also turbidity, how mixed up the water is with sediments and algal levels, was actually slightly worse, what we consider worse, in areas with better strips of mangroves. So that's something definitely worth taking a look at. But on the Robinson Preserve side of things, and this was interesting, this is Robinson Preserve in 2005. And then in 2006, you'll see those big ponds there, which are isolated from the rest of the property, suddenly got connected by waterways. And that waterways connected South Tampa Bay to Perico Bayou, which is to the west, and then Palmasola Bay, which is to the south off the map. And the interesting thing is Perico Bayou, which was the most surrounded by Robinson Preserve, we saw the turbidity levels drop a significant amount. So all throughout the Sarasota Bay region, the nutrient levels, the turbidity levels dropped over that time period. But one of the most significant differences was adjacent to Robinson Preserve. So the takeaways for the study is that it's complicated. It's not easy, just saying more mangroves makes water quality in specific better. Mangroves have a lot of things going for them. They protect from storm surge. They're a great place to go kayaking. But the relationship can be complicated. But restoring tidal flow can offset or reverse some of the water quality impacts. And there's benefits. We don't think about this a lot, but there's actually benefits to some of the man-made habitats, such as these restored mosquito ditches that were found at Robinson Preserve. So there were challenges along the way, working with the internal county GIS servers from New College. We had some issues where the servers kept crashing, so that was fun to get over. And historical data is taken for a project in particular, so mapping from one year to the next was not always consistent, so I had to, line things up and throw away some stuff that wasn't collected the same way. But what was cool is partners had unique information. So the county had a lot of historical information about the restoration project at Robinson Preserve. The college had access to a lot of journal information and historical aerials, and then the Water Atlas provided a lot of the water quality information. And I'm happy to say that both parties benefited. I personally graduated, and I have a lot to present with the ranger staff out at Robinson and the rest of the county. So the takeaways for this kind of partnership is it's great to use local students with interests that overlap with yours. If they're interested in natural areas and you have natural areas, they might be able to do some of the work looking at research, giving you data for the lands that you manage. They'd be great if you have a citizen science project that needs leadership and what they really want to do is collect, compile, and analyze data. That is a perfect matchup. You do need to be clear about what you expect from each party. So maintaining communication, always awesome. And you want to make sure that the projects you develop work for both of you. So it goes back to that communication and that overlapping interests. Just keep open lines and talk to each other. After we're all done, and I'm setting up to meet with our rangers after this, review your findings and make sure that the students that are working with you, keep you in the loop. And afterwards, keep in contact. We actually had a student who has worked with the county through her master's and her PhD work studying fish and invertebrate populations in the preserves. So they've been able to produce a lot of valuable data that we have used in our management plans and just in our general reporting. So, with that being said, do I have any questions?
How can you find professors?
How can you find professors? So we found most of our students actually by reaching out through our internship programs. So we worked with the staff at the colleges that coordinate internships, and that's where we found most of them. But basically, it's getting out there and meeting with them and getting to know people. Making those personal connections is really the first step.
How does installation of ditches help with mosquito population control?
I kind of breezed past that because I had a lot to squeeze in here. But mosquitoes breed in stagnant water. So the idea was if we increase water flow through an area and drain all the swamps, then we don't have mosquitoes. Well, the swamps, perform an important ecosystem function. So you're seeing a lot right now with integrated pest management and planned wetlands that do a little bit of draining and a little bit of keeping in order to keep, pest populations down, but also maintaining the ecological benefits of those wetlands. All right, thank you very much.